Guys, coming up for the second half of the season of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, because of course the season itself concluded tonight, and if you guys know, I already reviewed the first half of the season and the pilot episode of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend already. If you guys haven't done that, definitely check those out. But finally now I get to review the second half of this season, and you guys know from the first half that I absolutely have loved this show. I've loved this show. It's been one of the biggest surprises for me. It's quickly become one of my favorite shows on TV, and I think the second half was even better than the first half. The first half, I think, was a really good setup, but there were a lot of standalone episodes. The second half of the season is a lot more of a narrative. They're definitely creating more of a narrative. There's a lot more story going on, and I really appreciate that, because as much as I liked episodes where not much was going on, it was just kind of fun, or seeing Rebecca dealing with therapy, things like that, I really enjoyed most of what we got in the second half of the season, actually a lot more than the first half of the season. Don't get me wrong, I still really love the first half of the season, but I think the second half of the season really showed the potential that the show really has, and of course there's a lot to get into. Of course I'll talk about everything, including what happened in the finale when I get to the finale, that you guys know, but let's just get into the second half of the season, starting off with probably one of my favorite episodes of the entire show. I'm going to the beach with Josh and his friends. This episode I thought was fantastic. Not only was it a great return for the show, I thought it was also really a personal episode for Rebecca, because basically, as we know, Rebecca's kind of all alone. She only really has Paula at this point, and that's all she has. She only has Paula, and she doesn't really have any friends. And we see in the very beginning of this that basically Josh and Valencia and a bunch of his friends, they're going to the beach for what they call a crew day, and Rebecca decides to tag along, and basically she invites herself. Josh kind of wants her to go, but she kind of just invites herself, and Paula's already telling her this is a terrible idea, she shouldn't be doing this, and basically, Valencia is basically going to do whatever she can to ruin this, because as we know, she wants to expose Rebecca. She wants nothing to do with her. She knows she's hiding something, and the way this episode was done, I absolutely love. Not just the episode, but this storyline in general is just incredible. The way that this all was done. Basically, Rebecca ends up going on this party bus, and where most of this episode takes place, which I thought was very well done, and it was kind of a bottle episode in many ways, because everyone's pretty much seen on this party bus, which I thought was a really cool idea. We do cut to Paula every now and then, but most of it was on this party bus, and basically, Rebecca, we see, basically Valencia the whole time is trying to question her, what's going on, and eventually she asks her the question, why did she really move here? Because she knows it wasn't just because of, her wanting to move there. There had to be more of a reason. It wasn't just because of her job and everything, and basically, Rebecca doesn't want to admit the real reason. We know the real reason why. It was obviously because of Josh, and she never really wants to admit that. She actually basically admits that she moved to West Covina because she thought she fell in love with West Covina, and Josh buys this. Josh does buy this. Valencia thinks it's crazy, obviously, but Josh buys this, and you see that they kind of are bonding over this, what I definitely really did love. Valencia, meanwhile, is basically just trying to keep Josh on her own, doing whatever she can to keep him. Basically, she even, strips down, which I will say, Valencia is quite attractive, definitely, I will say that, so I had no problem with that, but she's, pretty hot, but definitely, kind of a bitch as well. But what I like about Valencia is I never really saw her as bitchy. I saw her more of just very attached. She's very attached to Josh. She's one of those girlfriends where no one can touch him, nobody can go near him. Anyone does anything that tries to jeopardize them, then that just ruins it. But I never really saw Valencia as a bad person. I saw her as a girlfriend that really just wanted attention, and Josh wasn't really giving it to her. If you really think about it, what's going on with Josh and Valencia isn't really, it makes sense why Valencia is acting the way she is. I mean, for 15 years, Josh has basically been with Valencia, nothing's happened, she's wanting to get married and things like that, and we'll get more into that in later episodes, but I did think they did a very good job of showing that here. Here, Valencia did come across kind of bitchy, but I do get what they were trying to show. Basically, this is the moment where, Josh basically buys it, and they start to bond, and basically when Rebecca gets off the bus, that's when she realizes the moment she confesses to Paul that she is in love with Josh, and it's the moment that Paul has been waiting for, because Rebecca's been very stubborn. She hasn't really admitted her problems, and finally she admits to Paul that, yes, I am in love with Josh, it's who I want to be with, and this really changed a lot of stuff, because after this, most of this focuses on her doing what she can to get with Josh, and She basically finds out that Josh is doing, and basically she finds out that Josh is doing this camping basically for kids, and she decides to tag along, and this is really where these two start to bond. Now, yes, she basically does join because it's Josh's camp, but it's also the camp that they used to go to. If you remember the camp in the very beginning of the show, how they met, it's the same exact camp they went to, and Rebecca wants to go there to kind of, get back the memories and just get back, the good old times with Josh, which you don't really know if it's going to work out. I did like her bonding with the girls in this episode. I thought that was definitely very well done, the way they did that. But basically, this is really when they start to get closer. Basically, Rebecca reveals a letter to Josh and everything, and she doesn't actually read him the letter. She basically she gives him the letter. She doesn't actually read to him. She plans on reading it to him, this really ridiculous song called Dear Joshua, Felix Chan. And they actually bond really well over this, you can tell. You can tell they're really bonding. He actually really starts to like her. I really enjoyed some of their scenes because it didn't come across as creepy. It didn't come across Rebecca just being creepy. It came across as really genuine. Josh, I think, really does like Rebecca, and he really does want to be here. You can definitely tell, and I think this is the moment where he's starting to realize that he might actually have feelings for Rebecca, and maybe he didn't think about that before, but I feel like in this episode, this is kind of the one where he's like, you know what, maybe I do like Rebecca, and I think that's very interesting. But then, of course, Rebecca has to screw it up, because then we get to one of the craziest episodes of this show. I mean, obviously, the show's called Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, so it's gonna be crazy, but this episode in general was just insane. That text was not meant for Josh. Crazy episode, the way this is done. I mean, basically, it's exactly what you think. Rebecca sends a text message to Josh instead of someone else. She meant to send it to Paula, she sends it to Josh, and she basically does whatever she can to get this, to get this text away from Josh. She literally goes to his house, breaks into his house, breaks into his house, tries to delete the text and everything, and it's a crazy thing that she's doing, but you can tell she's really going to extensive measures, and I don't really think Rebecca's crazy. Like I said before, I don't think she's crazy. I think she just doesn't think stuff through, and this really does go with that. Rebecca doesn't think stuff through, she doesn't do things well, and this really ruined things with Josh. He kind of stops talking to her. He thinks that she's kind of crazy, and obviously she kind of scares him. I mean, going to camp is one thing, but breaking into his house, that's kind of pushing it. Obviously, this kind of ruined things with Josh. You can definitely tell. He doesn't really know what to do with her after this, and she really wants to get that spark back. She wants to get that spark back. She wants to do whatever she can. She basically tries to go with Josh to this restaurant that his friends are at, and you can tell right away he really does not want her there. He does not want her there. He does not really want anything to do with her. He's hanging out with his friends, and it's just not really working the way she wanted it to. But then she decides to start this case. Paul and her come up with ideas that they're going to start this case basically against, against like water problems or things like that. And they decide to use this case. They decide to go to LA basically to defend this case, we see, and Rebecca actually runs into her rival, the girl that Audra Miller, I think her name was. Yeah, Audra Miller. If you remember, in the very beginning of the season, Rebecca's mother told her about this girl that is kind of her rival, and you can tell right away this is exactly who Rebecca once was. Rebecca really has changed, though. She's not as stiff, she's not as, crazy, and she's not really as, out there as she used to be. She's starting to be a little bit more normal, and you really do see that in this episode. She presents a very good case, and Josh really does admire that in her. You definitely do see it. They don't win the case, but they have a lot of people on their case. They get a lot of people on their side, and I really like the way that was done. Even though they didn't win, that doesn't matter to Josh. It matters to Josh that Rebecca had a really strong case. She really cared about what she was doing, and this is the moment where they actually kiss. They actually are about to kiss, you see, and something else happens before this, which I'll get into, but they're actually about to kiss. It's really crazy. They do actually kiss for the first time, and Rebecca's thinking, alright, then we're together, we're gonna be together now. That's not exactly true, because what ends up happening is Josh decides to go to Hawaii, basically to find himself, I'm thinking. He goes to Hawaii to find himself. He doesn't really know what to do about this, because after something like that, I mean, obviously he's with Valencia, but I think in his mind he's thinking, oh shit, do I still love Rebecca? So he kind of just goes to Hawaii with neither Valencia or Rebecca knowing really where he went, and Rebecca just wants to follow him to Hawaii, but then in this moment kind of realizes, which I loved in this episode, that she's actually the villain. Like, she's not a good person. She actually realizes here, you know what, maybe I'm actually the villain. Maybe I have been screwing things up. So she sees what's going on between Valencia and Josh does end up going back to Valencia. He doesn't go to Hawaii. He decides to go back to Valencia, and Valencia asks him point blank, do you love Rebecca? He says no, but you don't know if that's sincere, and Rebecca feels that she's the problem, and she starts to realize that she might not actually be the good person and that Valencia might actually have been the one for Josh all along, which I thought was a very interesting reveal. And basically, after this, she decides that she might not actually want to be with Josh. Like, she might need to not be with him. She decides to get on a plane. We don't know where. We think she's going to Hawaii. That's where she's headed. We think that's where she's going. But she runs into her therapist on this plane, and we get such a great episode here. Josh has no idea where I am is such a fantastic episode. The entire episode is finding out more about Rebecca's past and what she went through, finding out, and I mean, the stuff we find out in this episode is really, really deep, and you really care more about Rebecca than you ever did. We see that not only were her parents split up, she had to go from her father to her mother. Her mother did not like her father. Her father didn't do anything wrong, but her mother did not want Rebecca to hang out with her father, which is just really tragic to think about when you really think about it. And I like that they did take this seriously. Like, they showed exactly what was going on with Rebecca and the problems that she's had in her life, basically, and how she was once very happy when she did this one school play, and she hasn't been as happy since. And basically, it really makes Rebecca have all these new perspectives because she has her therapist as a dream ghost, basically. Kind of like It's a Wonderful Life a little bit, but really not, because she does actually come back and everyone's happy to see her. But she decides that she actually needs a break from Josh, that Josh is not someone that she can be with right now. Her and Josh is just not going to work. He's happy with Valencia. She needs to take a break. And she ends up getting invited to this wedding, we don't know how, but somehow she ends up getting invited to this wedding, and basically is a bridesmaid for Josh's sister. I can't think of her name right now, but she gets invited to Josh's sister, Jayma, that's her name, Jayma's wedding, and basically her and Valencia actually start to bond, believe it or not. Like, they actually start to bond, they pick out bridesmaids' dresses, and they're bonding over it. It's actually a really nice scene. You're wondering really what's going to happen here, if they're actually going to start bonding. Rebecca decides, though, after this, that the best thing to do is to kind of shut Josh out of her life. Shut Josh out of her life, shut Valencia out of her life. She decides to go on sort of this sex romp with Greg, and that's where I'm going to leave it because I want to get into the other things that happen this season. That's basically what happens with Rebecca. Let's get into the other side of the season. Then I can get to the really crazy stuff that happens a little bit later. So let's talk about Paula, because as we know, Paula did have a pretty big storyline in the first half of the season. And here, it's there, and then it kind of goes away. But honestly, I saw it as we didn't really need to see anymore because Paula's storyline is pretty much resolved. We see she actually wants to fix things with her husband and kids. She knows she screwed up. She wants to turn around, and we see that she actually does this, especially a whole situation with that one guy she was with. I can't think of his name right now. I can't think of his name. You guys know what I'm talking about. The one guy that she almost had sex with and she decided not to. Basically, what ends up happening is she actually ends up going on a dinner date with her husband. It actually goes really well. You see that they're bonding. They basically seem like they're back together. And we get probably one of the funniest scenes of the entire show in this episode, where she literally quotes the theme song line for line to her husband to explain Rebecca's situation. And it was so clever the way they did that. I absolutely love that. And the fact that we didn't get the intro till that scene was just perfection. I absolutely love that. It showed how funny the show can be, and I just love that. But after that, Paula doesn't really have much to do. She's kind of just Rebecca's sidekick after this, which I was perfectly fine with. I really saw it as we didn't really need to see the rest of Paula's story because her story just closed. And I'm sure we're going to get back into it in season 2, but after this, we very much focus on Rebecca and Josh and things like that, and that's kind of why this season was very Rebecca-centric. Daryl does actually have stuff going on, though, which I really did enjoy. Daryl, we see right away, has a huge attraction to White Josh, and, he thinks that this is just because he's a big fan of him, because of his workout stuff and things like that, and, you can tell that there's just something more going on there, and White Josh is gay, and basically, he kind of leads Daryl to figure out that Daryl is actually bisexual. He's not gay, he's bisexual. I've always kind of thought that there's the way that Daryl acts, and Daryl's always been one of my favorite characters. He's the guy that basically wants to have all these friends, and he's not very popular, but he wants to be cool, and he does whatever he can to do that, and him and White Josh actually do start a relationship. At first, we want to keep it private, but Daryl actually does out himself to everyone that he's bisexual. And again, just like Paul, that kind of goes away as well because we're focused on Rebecca. I had no problem with that because we focused on Rebecca. We saw we need to see those plots, and then we can move forward. Their lives are going on, but just now we need to focus more on Rebecca. And then the last thing to talk about is Greg. Then we can get into the last 2 episodes. Greg, basically, as we know, he did have this brief thing with Heather. It seemed like they really liked each other. Heather can tell that he is still in love with Rebecca. Rebecca, just because the fact that the trial that Josh and Rebecca are in is actually on TV, and Heather can see that, Greg still loves Rebecca. He still wants to be with Rebecca. He still has those feelings for her, and she tells him to go see her. He basically does, but right when he does, Josh and Rebecca are in the middle of kissing. He ends up leaving. Heather actually tells him it was just a test. She didn't actually want him to leave. It was actually just a test to see if he actually would do that. But he does, in fact, leave. They end up breaking up. Things don't end up well. And after this, Greg and Rebecca decide to go kind of on this sex romp and start this sexual relationship, which actually very severely damages her vagina, which I thought was kind of funny. First, she has like a UTI, but then, urinary tract infection. But then it gets even worse, and right away they just want no strings attachment. They want no strings whatsoever. They want no strings attached. They kind of just want to have sex, and you can tell that she is starting to fall in love. She's starting to get attracted to Greg. She's starting to think that maybe she's over, that she might be over Josh, and she even is directly lying to Paula, because Paula tells her, look, you can have sex with anyone, just don't let it be Greg, and she literally decides to go against Paula, and this really shows that Rebecca might actually be okay. It seems like she actually is getting better here, and she actually seems genuinely happy with Greg, and Greg, you can see, is kind of being an ass. Greg is kind of being an asshole about it. He's rubbing it in everyone's face. He even decides to go on another date, which is completely fine, because they're not actually dating, but he doesn't really seem like he wants any sort of emotional attachment whatsoever, and this is something that Rebecca's kind of upset with. Josh, in the meantime, is really in this slump because he's really upset. He doesn't understand why Rebecca's no longer falling for him. You can tell that he's starting to fall for Rebecca. Valencia doesn't understand where this is all coming from either, and he actually decides to go to, I can't think of the name, but this guy that actually gives him really good advice, and he takes his anger out, basically by doing a Footloose dance montage. That was really funny. I definitely really enjoyed that, and I like seeing, Josh as the crazy one for once. I thought that was really cool the way they did that. I definitely really did enjoy that, and basically what ends up happening is they all end up visiting Rebecca in the hospital. Rebecca does reveal to Paula that she is having sex with Greg, and that's basically how things end up. We go to the finale, which if you guys haven't seen the finale, I'm going to talk about everything that happened in the finale because there's actually a lot to cover in the finale I definitely do want to get into. If you guys haven't seen the finale, do not watch the rest of this review. I definitely do want to talk about it, and then I will get into things like the musical numbers and things I know you guys want me to get into. But let's get into this finale because there is a lot to talk about that happened in this finale. So it was a very eventful finale, and I'm very happy with that. I mean, there was a lot to get through, definitely. And the thing is, this is a show where it's hard to pick a favorite episode just because I think every single one really has some great qualities about it. And this was definitely, without a doubt, one of the best ones. I don't know if it was necessarily the best. I think the best is either the text message episode or the one with the dream sequence. Those are my two, right up there. Those are probably my two, or the case, or the one I'm going to the beach with Josh and his friends. This one was definitely up there, though. I really enjoyed this episode because right away you can see things are not good between Rebecca and Paula. They want to change things immediately, but this is the episode where you start to see that Paula might maybe actually be crazier than Rebecca, because not only has Paula been helping Rebecca with everything with Josh, she's been at the forefront of everything, giving her all these ideas. Paula did things that Rebecca didn't even ask her to do. For example, every single time Rebecca met one of Josh's family members or some related to Josh, that was all courtesy of Paula. She got their contact information, she did all this stuff, and even though Rebecca didn't ask her to do this, she did this. She even blackmailed Valencia's yoga trainer. She ended up, even the wedding, that was all because of Paula. And it's crazy to think about that she did this. I mean, obviously, she's always said that she's like a surrogate mother to Rebecca, and, she wants to help her as best as she can. But, I mean, come on. Like, this bitch is crazy, honestly. I never thought that Paula was as crazy as she is, and this episode really does show that, and I definitely really did love that, and she killed it in that scene. After everything I've done for you that you didn't ask for, that scene was amazing. I absolutely loved it. I thought everything about that song I just loved. It was very Gypsy-esque. You could definitely tell that Paula this was kind of like her closing number. It felt like we weren't going to see Paula for a while. I love the way that was done, and just a really great way to start that out. I really did love that. Rebecca, in the meantime, keeps thinking she's going to have this what's it called? I can't think what it's called right now. But she basically is saying that she's gonna have this huge, one indescribable instant where something big is gonna happen at this wedding and something is really gonna change. And that big thing she wants is she wants to settle down with Greg. She actually wants to be with Greg. She wants to possibly start a relationship. But you can tell he really doesn't want that. In fact, Josh is even accusing him of not wanting to be attached to Rebecca. And I did like the way that the relation between Josh and Greg really changes. We know these two were friends, but the more the season goes on, the more grumpier Greg gets and the more that Josh starts to like Rebecca, you can tell these two are very, very different. Greg is a lot more, aggressive, while Josh really is kind of like the nice one. He isn't a great guy. Like, he does have some qualities about him that obviously aren't great, but he is a really nice guy deep down, and that's the thing that's so great about Josh. While Greg is good at points, but he very much is an asshole at points as well. You can definitely tell. So, going back to this, though, she decides to go to the wedding with Greg, and he doesn't know it's a wedding. He decides to show up in, like, a button-down shirt of all things, and, like, jeans of all things. So, they go to this wedding, and that is when chaos just starts. Chaos gets crazy here. You don't really know what's going to happen at this wedding, and the way this was all done, I absolutely loved. Everything that happened in this wedding was crazy. First of all, we see the whole situation. I mean, where to start? First of all, let's talk about Josh and Valencia, because I really want to talk about that relationship overall. Like I said, that relationship for me, I can totally understand why Valencia wanted what she wanted. We see basically Josh's grandmother, I believe, gives him this family heirloom that Valencia picked out. It's like this ring. He's freaking out at her, saying, why'd you do this? You just wanted me to propose to you. But I did get Valencia's point. I mean, they've been married. They have been together for 15 years, and Josh hasn't done anything. He's always said, I'm going to propose. And it hasn't happened, and she's been waiting for that moment. And she realizes in that moment it's never going to happen. He's not going to propose to her. He doesn't love her that way. And all of this, he's done. He doesn't love her anymore. I really think that that's what it's about. He doesn't love Valencia anymore. He wants to be Rebecca, and I think she understands that, but she obviously is really upset because she genuinely wanted to be with Josh. And obviously, I'm not necessarily condoning what Valencia did. I mean, Valencia is, somewhat of a bitch. I definitely will say that. But she does have a point. I mean, obviously, he waited too long. She got really upset. It's perfectly understandable why things didn't end up well. Definitely, I can totally understand that. So they end up breaking up. Meanwhile, we see Daryl and White Josh actually go to the wedding together. I love the scene where Daryl was trying to persuade Paula to come to the wedding and basically, said, you're my friend. I thought that was really funny. Paula does end up making amends with Rebecca. You can definitely see right away that does happen. But the biggest part of this is Greg, Josh, and Rebecca, because everything that happens here is just crazy. There's a lot going on here. Let's first talk about the whole situation with Greg, because like I said, Rebecca really wants to settle down with Greg. She actually wants to tell Greg, I want to start, life together, and Greg is completely drunk. He's drunk. He doesn't even seem like he wants to be at this wedding, and this is something that kind of upsets him, especially Josh. Josh can see that Greg just isn't really taking anything seriously, and this really upsets him. This is a wedding that Rebecca didn't need to invite him to. She decided to bring him to this wedding, and he's not even acting nice about it. He's really being an asshole, and it's not so much that, I don't know if it's that he doesn't want attachments, but Greg really is an asshole. I'm going to say that right off the bat. Greg's an asshole. You really do see that here, and as much as a nice guy as he can be, he really is an asshole, and you really do see that in this episode, definitely. I do think he has feelings for Rebecca, but he doesn't say that here. He instead is very drunk. He is basically insulting everyone he sees, even saying the wedding is terrible, the wedding dance is cheesy, everything about it he doesn't like. I mean, he goes on and on throughout this entire episode about what's wrong with this wedding and everything. It's very interesting to watch. It's funny, but it's also kind of just crazy. Just what he ends up doing is he's an asshole, really. Like, if I had to, he really is an asshole. I can't really categorize him in any other way except that he's an asshole. But the other situation that goes on basically is this whole situation, like I said. Basically what ends up happening is they have the bride and groom at their first dance, and Rebecca wants to tell Greg basically the truth. She says that she genuinely wants to settle down with him. She didn't think she'd get attached, but she did. And Greg is imagining in his head Josh and Rebecca kissing, basically realizing that they should be together. He thinks they should be together. He's kind of just third wheel. He does not want to be third wheel. He says, we're cool. We can do whatever we want. We can have fun, but we are not going to be together. You do not want that attachment. And I think deep down, he's trying to do a good thing. He's trying to tell Rebecca that, look, I know you want to be with Josh. You don't actually want to be with me. I'm just a substitute for Josh. Go to Josh. That's what you want. Now, at this point, Rebecca thinks she's over Josh. She thinks she's over Josh. She thinks that she doesn't need to be with Josh anymore. But in the back of her mind, that is still kind of there. Anytime Josh walks into a room in this episode, you can tell that she still wants to talk to him. Josh definitely does like her. That definitely has happened in this episode, and you definitely do see that, which I thought was very interesting that was going on there. But basically, what ends up happening at the end of this episode is the the mother sings that song, one indescribable instant that she actually does sing that song, and Rebecca has no idea what's going on. But Josh then texts her, and her and Greg passes out, doesn't even give her an answer to what's going on. He just says that she's cool, and White Josh takes him home because he knows what's going on. It's not right to, he knows that when Greg is like this, he's obviously, it's just you don't want to see him basically. What ends up happening is Josh and Rebecca really do end up bonding. He texts Rebecca, says, come outside, and he tells her everything. He says that, Rebecca is, the whole thing of Rebecca's over. That the whole thing of Way to Valencia is over. I've ended it, and he basically tells her that he wants to be with her and that he's gotten closer to her. They end up making out, possibly having sex even, and in that moment, I love the way this was done. Greg just wakes up on the couch and says, holy shit, I should have said I love you. Like, he just realizes that he should have told Rebecca he loved her. But of course, he wasn't sober. He was drunk, and he realizes that he just should have told her he loved her. He's lost her. I don't think he's going to get her back, honestly, especially after the way this episode ends. And I don't know if he's going to get her back necessarily. We'll have to see what happens there. Although he does have a good chance because of what happens after. Because of the fact that Rebecca feels close to Josh, and because of the fact that things are going well, she fucks it up, of course. So like I said, Rebecca does not think things through. She basically reveals right to Josh that not only that she loves him and that she wants to be with him, but that she moved to West Covina for him. She finally admits it right in front of him. The look on his face is just everything that really shows, how crazy this situation really is. Not only the fact that Rebecca just straight out told him that, I think it's crazy that she did. I get that she felt close to him and wanted to obviously be with, got close to him and felt like she just finally needed to tell him because she hadn't told anyone. But, I mean, this really was the worst possible moment to do such a thing. The look on his face, he doesn't know what to do. He's kind of just torn at this point, and that is how this season ends. Overall, guys, I absolutely love this season. I think everything about it was fantastic. I think the writing was great. I think just the writing especially, the writing was never cliche. The writing always acknowledged the cliches, which I always loved. I think that was very well done. The show was always funny. It never did make me laugh. There wasn't a single episode that went by without making me laugh a lot. I always laughed at this show. There are way too many funny moments to name. I mean, way too many funny moments. Probably, like I said, the funniest being when Paula reenacts the theme song. I just thought that was absolutely hilarious what we saw. There were even some funny moments in this episode, like, for example, Rebecca as a little girl. I thought that was very funny. The whole thing, Rebecca and Paul in that hospital, I mean, that obviously was very funny. I definitely really did love the way that scene was done. There were just so many funny moments, way too many to name. Definitely really did love that, and that's one of my favorite things about the show, is that the show always did stay funny. But I did like that it wasn't afraid to get dramatic. It does have heart to it. It shows that this is a show they're taking seriously, but they're just not taking it as seriously as others. At the end of the day, this is a show that they are going to make some jokes, and I think they did a very good job with that. Let's talk about the songs, because I really do think, I mean, I've said it before, the songs are amazing, but the songs were even better this time around. I mean, they really improved. They expanded the genres. They show more what they can do. They gave other characters more songs, and I love that. I mean, between Greg getting this really funny rap about, how selfish he is and that he can do anything that he wants, basically, it's kind of this, basically, those songs where it's like, oh, you can do anything, if it was like a really selfish version. It was very funny, definitely. Rebecca's song, I'm the Villain in My Own Story. Without a doubt, though, the best song of the season is You Ruin Everything, because that is when Rebecca is literally criticizing herself. She knows what she's going through. She basically is bluntly saying, I ruin everything, I cause all these problems, I am a disaster, I'm a mess, and basically, it's a very, kind of like silly version of really what Rebecca's thinking of her mind. You can tell that she really is thinking that everything she touches gets ruined. Everything she does, somehow she fucks it up. And this is a very good example of that. You Ruin Everything, I think, really defines this entire show. Rebecca does ruin everything. It's because she overthinks things. It's because she thinks things through, and she doesn't do things at the right time. I don't think she really, I do think she thought about doing that, but she just didn't do it right. I mean, obviously, there wasn't, I don't think, any right way to do it. I think eventually she did need to come out and admit that she did move for Josh, because we initially know that is what she moved for, when in many ways it is because of that commercial she saw on TV. That's a big reason to it as well. But mainly, yes, the main reason she moved was for Josh, and now that she admitted, I don't really know what's going to happen between her and Josh. It's going to be very crazy to see what happens there. But all the songs, like I said, were fantastic. I loved every single one of them, and there really wasn't a dud in the mix. I can't really think of a song I didn't love. I think every song really was was fantastic. I can't think of one that didn't work for me. Every song in the season, even if I didn't like a song, like the first half of the season, there were some I didn't love, but I love pretty much every song in the second half of the season. I really think they improved on the songs, definitely. I will definitely say that. Like I said, though, I absolutely love this season. Let's talk about Season 2, because we are now heading to Season 2. Season 2 is happening, and I don't really know what's going to happen. Let's talk about Paula, because Paula we know is now crazier than Rebecca, knowing she did all these things. I mean, Paula needs to be put in, like, a mental institution. I really think that the next time Rebecca does these things, she needs to not have Paula help her. Paula really ruined a lot of things. I mean, she did get Rebecca closer to Josh, but all the things she did is just insane, and it's nothing I think Rebecca would ever think of doing. Rebecca's not a bad person. That's something I think they showed very well in that scene where Paula is, I mean, that song as well, like I said, I think that was definitely one of my favorites of the season, Paula's song in this episode. I think she killed it. I think you definitely understood what she was going through after everything I've done for you. It felt like a villain song, it really did, and Paula really is the true villain of the show as the show goes on. I mean, Rebecca, yes, is a villain herself, but Paula really seems to be the villain, like the person that kind of motivates Rebecca to do these terrible things that she obviously doesn't really want to do. And you know, basically, I don't really know what's going to happen there. I think, you know, Paula needs to not help Rebecca because that really ruined a lot of things. She did obviously get her closer to Josh's family, but other than that, I mean, Paula really made Rebecca come across as a stalkerish kind of presence, and I really think that Paula needs to be dialed down a bit, and someone needs to bring her down. We'll have to see what happens with that. Is Paula going to regret what she did? I'm not really sure. That's going to be very interesting. We're going to see more of her and her family. I like seeing the arc with Daryl. Like I said, I think that was very well done. This is not the last we've seen of Valencia. I know for a fact this is not the last we've seen her. We're going to see Valencia again. I don't think this is the end we've seen. I do think there's going to be something with Valencia and Josh again. I don't really know what's going to happen. Especially after this, I do think Josh is going to try to get her back. I don't really know how this whole fallout is going to be. But overall, guys, I absolutely love the season. Everything about it was incredible. I am so happy with the way it turned out. Obviously, you guys know I love both halves. I think this was a pretty perfect season. I don't really have many complaints with it at all, except for that one episode that I thought was kind of random that didn't really belong in there. But overall, guys, let me know what you guys saw this season. Love to hear your thoughts on it. I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for the season finale. Once again, a season finale of Better Call Saul, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.